When I was 13 years old, my father and I would take daily trips to our local laundromat to do our drying, because while we had a washing machine at home, our dryer had died and we couldn't afford to get a new one. Usually we'd just sit in the car in the parking lot and listen to the radio, or go for a drive along the river. However, with the winter weather quickly approaching, my father needed to get some new wiper blades for his windshield wipers, and decided to drive up the road to Walmart. While he went to the automotive section, I decided to go over to the books and magazines to see if they had anything that interested me. As I perused the shelves looking at the graphic novels and paperback books, I heard a kind of soft sobbing coming from behind me. I walked to the end of the aisle and saw the source was a guy a few aisles over, sitting on the bench near the pharmacy section. He saw me looking at him and stood up and moved down an adjacent aisle. Returning to what I was doing, I decided on getting Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 3, titled Double Trouble, and I was about to join my father in the automotive section when he texted me and asked me to grab him some deodorant from Health and Beauty. I walked down the aisles to the Health and Beauty section, and that's when I saw the guy again. He was just standing, staring at the shaving cream, still sobbing, and I just shook my head and grabbed a thing of Old Spice deodorant, my father's brand, and was about to leave when I heard a loud huffing sound followed by a loud grunting. I turned to see the sad guy standing there, holding a razor blade in his left fingers, stained with blood and blood pouring from his wrist of his right arm. I immediately ran from the aisle looking for someone and found an employee nearby stocking shelves. "Help!" I shouted, pointing to the Health and Beauty section. "A guy just slit his wrist over there." The next several minutes were a blur of employees and paramedics who rushed over to help the guy, and my father and I watched as he was wheeled out on a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance. According to the newspaper a few days later, the guy survived a suicide attempt, having sliced horizontally instead of vertically. Turns out he had been newly divorced from his wife of 10 years and didn't want to be alone. I hope that he got the help he needed and didn't try to kill himself again. I was the store manager of a nationwide mall computer gaming store. This was long before GameStop and cell phones. We were located on the left side facing the middle of the mall, with JCPenney's to the left at the end. This detail plays into what happened. My ex-wife is a strikingly beautiful Latina woman. She was only 20, and my daughter 1.5 at the time. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, we had very beautiful babies. They almost looked like dolls. The reason I say this is my daughter attracted way too much attention as a baby. We stopped going out in public because people were constantly approaching us and trying to touch her. It was a Sunday. I would work the whole day since it was a short day. The three of us would go to work. My ex-wife would dress our daughter and herself up and make a day out of it. She liked to shop and wander for the day, coming back to have lunch. Being the manager, I took long breaks as well. Everything is going along fine, like any other Sunday. I go out to give her some money and my spidey street senses start going crazy. I look to the left and see a man intently looking at my wife and our daughter. I meet his gaze. He doesn't look away. We had had a huge wedding with 200 plus guests. I asked my wife if she knew the person staring at her. We both look up and he was gone. Couldn't have been 2 to 3 seconds since I last looked at him. There was something strange about him, I remember to this day. He was dressed in a dark gray suit with a dark gray overcoat. Not to trouble her, I told her not to worry about it. We had lunch and we took the long way back to the store. We stopped by mall security. I introduced her to the security guys who had become good buddies with me. I pulled them aside and told them what had happened. They were concerned. We stopped by the info booth and I tell the person working there to let me know if she sees him. My ex-wife loves to shop at JCPenney's and goes shopping in the store. Before she goes in, I tell her about the man in the gray suit She lets me know she'll keep an eye out for him. Later on, there's a call on the store phone. An employee tells me it's the phone. I'm like, yeah, I heard it ring. He tells me he needs some help. He pulls me aside and says it's your wife, and she sounds scared as hell. I jump on the phone. She tells me the man I had described has been following her for over half an hour. When he had first showed up, she said he was reaching for our daughter. I immediately call security. They come up the middle with my employees standing watch on the entrance to JCPenney's. I go out the back into the parking garage, which was no more than 50 feet away. Only 2 entrances into the store, front and back. Lots of emergency exits on the parking garage side. So the only entrance not covered was in front. Luck would have it, a police officer had pulled someone over from the street and was in the front parking lot. By this point, I don't want the gentleman to get away. I want him caught. Everyone starts converging on the store. He's got nowhere to go. They walk to the station where my wife is surrounded by the store manager, several employees, and they have our daughter behind the counter. The police officer had been alerted. Mall security escorts both of them out of the store to me. We put them in our car and they drive straight to her mother's. They continue to search the store, every nook and cranny. He was never found. To this day, I can remember every detail. But the detail that sticks with me most, his eyes were coal black. It all started a few weeks ago on a Sunday morning. I still live with my parents while I'm going to college, and we were running low on some stuff, so I offered to go to Walmart. When I get there, everything was going smoothly, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Then, when I was on the cleaning supply aisle, hunting up some bleach, I feel something slide across my butt. I looked back with my well-known bitch stare to see an overly obese man dressed up in a greasy-looking sweats and a white t-shirt covered in stains that barely covered his hairy belly. He was wearing sandals exposing his fungus-infected feet and was wiggling his toes while smirking at me. Just so you know, it didn't feel like a hand that had brushed my butt. Take a good guess at what body part he used. I said, "Hello, do I know you?" He replied, "He. Do you remember me? We went to high school together." At this point, I seriously doubted that. He looked almost in his late 30s with a lack of hair on top of the nasty, greasy neckbeard he sported. I replied, "Not really. It was nice meeting you though, sir, but I'm on a time limit and I gotta go." And I left without a backwards glance. For the rest of my trip in there, he was following me with that creepy smirk of his. I didn't know what his problem was, and I still don't. I had never encountered someone like this before in my life. It was a very creepy and nerve-wracking experience for me, but it wasn't the end. After that day, I had one more run-in with him that was basically him asking if I was single and complimenting me on my nice bottom and my chest, although he was more vulgar about it. Then it was like I was seeing him everywhere. I was always second-guessing myself and wondering if who I saw really was him. My parents were getting worried, and after hearing my mom plead for me to tell her what was wrong, I explained everything. Both of them were pissed to say the least, and my dad, bless him, drove up to our Walmart searching for him. Of course, he never did find him until a few days ago. Or it's more like the beard found me. That's when shit hit the fan. I was already stressed by school, looking for a part-time job, and this weird neckbeard that I was paranoid about. While helping my mom with cleaning, we all heard a loud honk from outside. My dad went to investigate while Mom and I continued to clean. Eventually, though, my curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced out of our curtains to see that that piece of garbage had followed me home. He was standing there in different clothing and chatting with my dad, who had no clue who the guy was. His eyes caught mine and he smirked that disgusting smirk at me. I lost it. I stormed through the doors, screaming profanities at him and ready to beat his ass. I didn't care that he was taller and bigger than me. I just wanted him gone. Somewhere over my haze of fury, I could hear my mom screaming for me while my dad was cursing up a storm. I must have yelled out that it was him, the guy who'd been stalking me, and now he knew where I lived. The next thing I know, I'm wrapped up in my mom's arms while my dad just lost his shit. My anger died down quickly after seeing my dad's. He'd always joked that I'd never seen him truly angry, and he was right. Mom and I finally got him off when the creep was on the ground and bloodied. We called the cops and they came and got him. The reality of this whole situation was darker than what I had thought. The day when the police searched his vehicle, they found photos, lots and lots of photos. When they got back to us, we were told to drive down to the police station, and we did, and just my dad and I. When we got there, there was a detective waiting along with a few officers. I remember just feeling lightheaded when seeing them and realizing that this was a lot worse. The detective brought us to a room and talked me through what had happened, and afterwards he pulled out a handful of photos. I stared at them in silence, and then I lost the contents of my breakfast all over the floor. There were photos of me walking my dogs, out having lunch with my friend, of me just in town in general. There was even a photo of me from when Mom and I went a few cities over. It was frightening. But there wasn't just pictures of me, oh no. There were pictures of other women with equally dark brown hair and blue eyes like mine. After calming down with the help of the detective and my fuming father, the detective began to tell me about the bastard and what he was planning to do. To be blunt, he was a druggie who had a dream about a beautiful woman who worshipped the ground he walked on, but he couldn't remember what her face looked like. He did remember that she had dark brown hair and blue eyes. I was trying to not laugh hysterically and on the brink of a panic attack. I said, "You're joking, right? Right? This has to be a prank because I'm just a nobody. He shouldn't be obsessed with me." After another attempt of calming me down, he also explained that after finding the photos, they got a warrant to search his house. They found more pictures scattered about, and tons of them on his phone. They also found a bunch of rope, chains, duct tape, explicit toys, handcuffs, knives, and a gun. The assumption that was made is that he was planning on kidnapping me that day and bringing me home to do who knows what. But what he didn't know was that I still lived with my parents. There were never any pics of my home, and he didn't know that showing up would lead to a satisfying ass whooping. I'm sorry for the unsatisfactory end, but I don't know how long he'll be in prison. Turns out he assaulted one of the women from the photos, but I hope that I never see his face again, or I'm liable to do something I won't regret. Back in the 90s, when malls were pretty much life for a teenage girl, I was there almost every day. My girlfriends and I would save our lunch money from school, and then spend it after school to go to the food court and buy a soda and maybe a slice of pizza or something. Then we would walk around talking to boys or go window shopping and make lists of all the things we wanted to buy. If we were lucky, we could talk our parents out of some money and maybe actually buy something. Either way, it didn't matter because we were there. One day, my friends and I were doing our usual. It was September of my junior year. I remember that our parents had given us money to pick up some accessories for the homecoming dance that was a week away. It was 4 of us, Michelle, June, Sam, and myself. We went to Claire's first to find some earrings. Spent some time in there looking around and whatnot, and Sam noticed an old guy in there staring at us. He was probably in his 40s, and while it was kind of odd for him to be there, especially by himself, we thought maybe he was looking for a present for his daughter or something. We went to get some Sparrows and a drink before we continued to other stores, and this time Michelle noticed him in the food court. He was over in the Chinese food section, sipping a drink and staring at us still. It was bad enough he seemed to be following us, but his molester mustache and thick-rimmed glasses didn't help him at all either. We continued on with our shopping anyways, and we saw him everywhere we went. We were getting really freaked out by now and decided to call our parents to come pick us up. Of course, back then we didn't have cell phones, so we headed to the payphones to make the call and get out of there. June was on the phone with her mom, trying to explain what was going on because her mom said she couldn't pick us up until after her brother's baseball practice, which would be another hour. The payphones were right by one of the exits, and me and the other girls were leaning up against the glass right next to the door. The man that had been following us comes in behind us while we were facing into the mall, so we didn't see him. He grabbed Michelle, who was the smallest out of all of us, and tried to drag her outside, probably into his car, which we saw before he left had been pulled up right next to the door. We all start swinging our bags at him, yelling at him to let her go, and June comes over the top of us with her backpack still full of books from school and lands it right on top of his head. He stumbled back a bit, letting go of Michelle, and cursed us out before he hopped into his car and took off. Of course, we told mall security, and they reviewed the security tapes. They were able to get a screenshot of his face and posted up flyers in the security office that he wasn't allowed in the mall. They also filed a police report for the assault. I'm not sure if they ever found out who he was because we stopped going to that mall and went to the one across town instead. June got her license later that year and would drive us, and if we ever wanted to leave, we didn't have to wait for a ride anymore. That was probably the scariest thing that I've ever been a part of. This happened 3 years ago, the one and only time I tried to go shopping on Black Friday. I had avoided it my whole adult life because of all the horror stories I've heard and seen on the news. It seemed crazy what people would do to save a few bucks, but that year I figured it couldn't be all that bad. It had to be only small isolated incidences that the news blew out of proportion for ratings. Well, I went and Walmart was packed. This already made me nervous that maybe the stories were true. You get that many people into a confined space dealing with money and attitudes were sure to boil over. Either way, I was already there, so I took a deep breath and made my way in. It was 6 a.m, and I was hoping that by being early I might beat the crowds, but it sure didn't look that way. I had some gift ideas for the wife and kids already, so I went as fast as I could to the areas that they were at. Sure, it was crowded, but at first, everything seemed fine. People were orderly and almost polite. That was until I went to the toy section. I don't remember what it was I was getting, but it must have been one of the hot toys that year, because when I got there was only one left. I thought I was lucky and grabbed it. Next thing I know, this woman loudly clears her throat until I notice her. I look over and she says, "Excuse me, but you grabbed my son's toy." I double-checked it to make sure it was what I thought it was, and yes, it was. It was still in the package, so it couldn't have belonged to her. "No," I said. "I grabbed the toy that was for sale on the shelf." "Yes, but my son really wanted that toy this year, so if you could give it to me, I'd really appreciate it," she responded. I mean, I know it was just a toy and no big deal. I could have handed it over and everything would have been fine. Truth is, I'm not the best gift giver, and I really wanted to make up some not-so-great gifts I'd given in the past this year, so I told her no and that she would have to try to find it somewhere else. I heard her take a deep breath and thought she was trying to calm herself, so I turned to walk away. Well, what I thought was her trying to calm herself was actually her preparing to fight. She said, "Excuse me, but I don't think you understand. My son really wants that gift this year." I replied, "No, I don't think you understand. I got to it first and you'll have to look somewhere else." What she did next still leaves me baffled. Instead of accepting it was first come, first serve, she tried to reach for the toy that was in my hand. I quickly withdrew it out of her reach, which was met with a frustrated huff. I tried to walk away again, and then I felt her grab my arm. And with a strength I wouldn't have expected from such a small woman, she pulled me into her and tried to reach around me to grab the toy out of my hand furthest from her. When I instinctively pushed her away from me, she fell back and started to scream that I had assaulted her. At first, no one seemed to care, so she started screaming louder, and then an employee came running up to see what the problem was. We both explained our sides of the story to her. She painted me to be an aggressive person who had ripped the toy out of her hand and refused to give it back, going so far as to push her down. I tried to explain my side, but the employee wasn't seeming to buy it until a couple came forward and said they had witnessed the whole thing. The employee asked the other woman if what the couple had said was true, and she floundered for a bit before she reached into her purse, pulled out a can of pepper spray, sprayed me in the face, and tried one last time to take the toy from me. The couple fortunately were very annoyed with her antics too and pulled her off of me. She wrestled free of them and ran from the store. I was standing there, face on fire and screaming in pain. The employee took me to the bathroom to try and help wash off the pepper spray. Of course, police reports were filed, but I never heard anything back from them. My son did get his toy that year, and I was super dad, which almost made it worth it. I'm glad she wasn't a little bit crazier and all she pulled out of her purse was that pepper spray. It could have been much worse. One thing I know is that I'll be doing my shopping online, and I will never go out shopping on Black Friday again.